We are nearing the end of Final Gifts, written by Maggie Callanan. My name is Natalie. I'm the Good Shepherd here on our small hobby farm in central North Carolina, and I so enjoy sharing these books that I've read more than once before in audiobook format, and I upload them all to my social media under the playlist titled with the book. So each day I read one chapter, and I upload it each day, and so you'll find each chapter under my playlist. Final Gifts, a book written by hospice workers sharing experiences of people in their final moments of life dying. Chapter 14, Symbolic Dreams. I dreamed about ... Dreams can be fascinating. People communicate with themselves through dreams, their unconscious minds bringing material to the attention of their conscious selves. In recounting dreams, people also communicate with others. People who develop nearing-death awareness know they're not dreaming when they see a place or beings that others cannot. I'm going to stop right there because this is how it is also talking to angels. But dreams may help communicate about the second part of nearing-death awareness, what they need to die peacefully. We are not experts in dream analysis, but we do have considerable experience listening to dying people's dreams and know that they often can be significant. The dreams of someone facing a terminal illness often relate to strong emotions and contain clues about important needs. By listening carefully, we can help people explore those needs and feelings and sometimes find solutions. Let's start with Becky's story. Becky, a reporter in the Washington office of a major newspaper, was 34. She lived with her husband, Joel. They had two big dogs that always escorted me into the bedroom, and as Becky said, supervised everything I did. If I went into the den with Joel or to the phone in the kitchen, one would accompany me. The other would stand guard at the foot of Becky's bed. Becky was a warm, quick-witted woman whose sense of humor remained strong, even when the rest of her energy diminished. However, on my first visit, she seemed anxious and weary. She knew she was dying. "I know things don't look very promising for me," she said. "My doctor's been telling me for weeks that I should call the hospice. I guess there's nothing more that can be done." She said her reluctance to call was because she thought having hospice meant that she'd have to talk about dying. "You know, the doom and gloom approach," she said. "I could write a story about other people dying. I could find out everything about them, how they feel, what they do. But when it comes to me, I don't want to discuss any of it." "We'll try to make this time as comfortable as it can be," I said. "If you want to discuss dying, I'll be here. But I won't try to make you talk about anything you don't want to talk about." "Then let's not talk about it. Let's just have a good time," she said. "I think we'll get along fine. I can see the dogs approve of you." I laughed. One of the dogs sighed loudly and sat on my foot, and the other was leaning his shaggy golden head against my skirt. "Good," she said. "We'll have laughter instead of tears." We quickly grew to like one another. She often asked general questions about other dying people. Newscaster Frank Reynolds had died recently, saying, "This question is off the record. I just want some background information." About a month after I started visiting, I sensed something different about Becky. Joel ushered me into the bedroom, then left me alone with her. "I'd better leave," he said. "Becky has something she wants to discuss with you." Becky looked very serious. She patted the bed for me to sit beside her and took my hand. "I have to tell you about this dream I had last night. I guess it was a dream. I don't usually remember dreams, but this was so real," she said. "I had a dream. I had a tape recorder. I was supposed to be interviewing someone, but I didn't know who it was. The recorder kept running, but nothing had been said, and I started to feel upset." She was silent for a minute or two, then said, "I suddenly realized I was supposed to be interviewing Frank Reynolds, and I couldn't think of what to ask him. I woke up feeling very upset that the tape was going to run out, and I still hadn't asked him anything. What do you think all of this means?" "I have a feeling you have an idea about that yourself," I said. "Can you tell me what you make of it?" "I don't seem to be able to say anything today," she said. "Can you help me?" "What did you think of Frank Reynolds?" I said. "Well, he was one of the best," she said. "He was so professional, so well prepared, but he was also very personable. I have the sense that if there was something you wanted to know, and you could call up anyone at all to ask for answers, he might be the one," I said. "Is that possible?" Becky's eyes twinkled. "Well, he was the best," she said with a smile. "I always liked the best." "And what would you want to interview Frank Reynolds about?" I said. You'll have to tell me, she answered. Suddenly, I don't seem to be any good with words. Maybe you're wondering about dying and what it's going to be like, I said. He just died, so he should be able to tell you. He's someone you respect, so you'd love to have the chance to find out from him what it's all about. If you're afraid of dying, interviewing him would be a way to find out if there's anything to be scared of. Becky was quiet for a few minutes, holding my hand tightly. But I'm not dreaming now, and he's not here, she said, her voice trailing off, her eyes calm and serious and fixed intently on mine. Can I try to give you some answers, I said. Yes, but I don't know the questions. Asking her to stop me at any time if she wanted to, I started to talk about death. I described how people usually become weaker, slip into a coma, stop breathing, and die. I asked her if she wanted to hear more. She nodded. I told her what I thought her death would be like. Probably the same drifting into coma and easy death. I mentioned that many people fear dying because they don't know much about it. I told her about specific fears about death, especially about suffering. I related this to her condition and said her pain probably would continue, but that we'd keep it controlled, as we had so far. Then I said, some people had concerns about what happens after death. No, that's not it, Becky said. Then she was quiet for a few minutes before smiling again. Thank you. I feel better, she said. That dream was the biggest interview of my life, and I thought I blew it. But I got the information after all. Would you explain to Joel? Becky never talked about death again. Our conversation about her dreams seemed to help answer her questions and calm her fears. People's needs can be similar, but the way they express them, particularly in dreams, can be quite different. Moving on to the story of Jenny. Jenny was 9 years old and dying of cancer, brain cancer. One day she had a stroke that left her blind and paralyzed. From then on, she deteriorated rapidly. Her father, Matthew, was a diplomat. He and his wife, Pauline, came from the same small Ohio town, but hadn't spent much time there in 10 years. They had lived overseas for most part. When Jenny became ill, Matthew was reassigned to Washington. Pauline was realistic about her daughter's illness. On my first visit, she said, "All I ask now is that she doesn't have any pain and that she can die at home." They had decided not to give Jenny the details of her illness. One morning, I was showing Pauline how to wash Jenny's hair in bed. Jenny told us she'd had a dream the night before in which men wearing gray suits were taking her to a big, ivy-covered house. She described the house in detail. Red brick, polished wooden floors, ivy curling around the windows. As I was asking Jenny about the dream, Pauline began backing away, eyes wide and filled with tears. Saying she needed more towels, she left the room. Jenny continued to talk about her dream. I finished her hair. I asked how the dream made her feel. "Well, I didn't know where I was and who those men were and where they were taking me," she said, looking very puzzled. When I finished Jenny's hair, she was tired and settled down for a nap. In the other room, I found Pauline and Matthew crying in each other's arms. "That house she's talking about is the funeral home in Ohio where we're going to have her body sent," she said. "We decided to have her buried at the cemetery near my parents' home. Why is she dreaming about it?" Pauline, Matthew, and I talked about the meaning of Jenny's dream. At first, they wondered if Jenny could have overheard them talking about the funeral and burial. Then they remembered they had talked about the funeral home by name, not ever describing it. Jenny didn't know their hometown well and had never been to the funeral home or even near it, as far as they knew. So what could the dream mean? I suggested they ask Jenny. Pauline was afraid Jenny would see how upset she was, and Matthew was concerned that Jenny might ask if he knew this place. I suggested perhaps we could identify how the dream made Jenny feel. Recognizing the feeling behind a dream often reveals its meaning. Pauline thought Jenny seemed puzzled but not afraid. Could she mean she needed to know what was going to happen to her? Matthew and Pauline agreed it might be worth letting their daughter talk about what was puzzling her. They asked if I would call their minister, whom Jenny loved, so he and I could talk with her together. The next day, their minister and I visited Jenny. He asked how she was. "Fine," she said. "That's what you always say. But really, how are you doing?" He said. "I think I'm getting worse," Jenny said. "I can't see. My right arm and leg don't work, and my left one doesn't do much either. I can't even hold Teddy," a stuffed bear that we rested on Jenny's pillow so she could stroke it with her cheek. "So there are lots of changes," I said, "and they all make it seem like you're getting worse. Is that right?" Jenny nodded. "Do you wonder what's going to happen?" the minister asked. "I think I'm going to die," she said. "What do you think?" "Well, only God can know for sure," he said. "But from what you're telling me and what I see, I think you might. Do you want to talk about that?" "Yes, but I didn't know who to ask," Jenny said. "I thought it might upset Mom and Dad. Sometimes after they think I'm asleep, I hear them crying." "Tell us what you want to know," he said. "Well, I'm not scared to be dead. I think I understand about that. The part of me that loves Mom and Dad will go to heaven, right?" Jenny said. "And then my body will get buried. But what about before I die? What'll it be like for me? And what about Mom and Dad? Will they be all right afterward?" I described what I thought would happen, how she'd get weaker and not want to talk, smile, eat, or drink, and that then she wouldn't even feel like breathing, and her breathing would stop. I told her it wouldn't hurt, because we'd continue to give her medicine to relieve any pain. She asked if either of us had seen people die, and if it looked difficult. We said it looked like it was easy, that sometimes dying people seem to have relatives or friends who already have died there with them. "No angels?" she said. "Can't I have an angel?" The minister laughed. "Jenny, if you want an angel, I'm sure you'll have one," he said. Jenny lived 2 more months and died the way we had expected. Afterward, Pauline and Matthew talked about Jenny's dream. Understanding it helped them understand what she needed. As she was dying, she had been remarkably unafraid, and they were sure her conversation with me and the minister had eased her fears. After kissing her daughter's cheek, Pauline said, "I think I'll put Teddy in the coffin with Jenny, but I know she won't be lonely. I'm sure she's found an angel by now." Identifying the feelings for Becky, frustration, and for Jenny, feeling puzzled, lead to the same need: information, which we had and could share with them. Sometimes the dream's meaning isn't what we think at first, and the need cannot always be met. Moving on to Lawrence. Lawrence was 68 and dying in the hospice inpatient unit. He told me his dream as I was giving him a back rub, part of his nighttime ritual. A warm washcloth for his face and hands, a toothbrush and mouthwash, and a back rub. "It eases the stiffness in my back, so I feel relaxed and I'll sleep better," he said. Although it certainly relaxed him, it rarely meant that he'd go to sleep. Instead, it seemed to encourage him to talk, often for hours, about concerns he never mentioned in the daytime. "I had such a vivid dream," he said. "I was in a circus tent, swinging up high on a trapeze. I just had a dream. Same dream. Whoa. Down below, I could see lots of people talking and laughing, and there were music and beautiful banners, but I kept swinging farther and farther. I knew that I could let go of the trapeze, and I'd just keep going into what was out there. And out there, it was cold and dark, lonely and empty. There was nothing. Okay, trapeze, I'm just learning right now with my angel communications, which are like near-death awareness and near-death experiences, and yet I'm not dying. I'm literally connecting with that other space and place that is not a part of Earth. The trapeze is a metaphor. It's a vision to give you of something about flying free, flying high. Whoa, whoa, whoa. That's amazing. We talked about what he thought the dream might mean. "Well, down below in the tent is what being alive is like," he said. "It's people and noise and warmth and beautiful colors. But out there where it's cold and lonely is death. That's what it's going to be like after I die. Cold and lonely, and then nothing. I'll go through the cold and dark, and then I'll be nothing." We talked about the dream several times. I encouraged him to talk with others also. After several nights of describing and discussing his dream, Lawrence realized it also described his life. His parents had been stern and undemonstrative. His wife had left him, telling him he was cold and unloving. His 2 sons were not close with him. The younger one lived in California and visited only every few years. And although his older son lived in town, he never came to see his father. Lawrence had no friends, only a few business associates. "They had their secretary send flowers when I first got sick, but they don't want to see me," he said. When I asked what would make his life less lonely, he said he'd like to see his sons. The younger son did come, but after an awkward greeting, the 2 seemed to have very little to say. The older son refused to visit his father. Lawrence's dream at first sounded like a description of how his death would be, but really showed how he perceived his life. He was able to observe warmth and color and people and joy, but never felt a part of it. The dream expressed his feelings of loneliness. and after some thought and discussion, he was able to say what would relieve that loneliness. Unfortunately, the people he wanted and needed to help him could not. Those of us caring for him could empathize with his emotional pain, but we could not relieve it. He remained sad and lonely until his death. Sometimes dreams cause feelings of fear. Exploring those feelings can be particularly important. The story of Isabel. Isabel, 39, was a psychologist. She had very complicated physical problems, and I visited her many times to teach her how to manage them. Her terminal neurological disease had progressed rapidly, ending her working days and much of her independence. Her younger brother, Edward, a poet, had moved in to help take care of her. Isabel often mentioned the extra pressure she felt because of her profession. "You have no idea how difficult it is to be a psychologist," she said. "My friends say it must be easier for me because I should know how to cope, but it's no easier for me than for anyone else. Dying is a new experience for me, and I'm as distressed and anxious as anyone would be. Even Edward asks me for advice about how he should deal with this, and he's supposed to be taking care of me." One morning, she said, "I need to talk about this terrible dream I had. I've had it every couple of weeks for the last few months. It was awful. I was buried alive." With a look of horror, she described dreaming that she was in a coffin, unable to get out, feeling the weight of the earth pressing down on her. "When I did wake up, I was still so frightened that I was afraid to go back to sleep," she said. Usually the best interpreter of any dream is the dreamer. I asked Isabel if she could explain her dream. "Well, it reflects my anxiety, of course," she said. "I'm afraid the funeral director will take me away while I'm still alive. Then they'll put me in a coffin, take me to church for the service, then to the graveyard and bury me. But what if I'm still alive?" "That sounds pretty scary," I said. "I'm the wrong kind of doctor for this," Isabel said. "I don't know much about death. How will you know that I'm dead? How can you be sure that I'm not still alive when the funeral director takes me away?" The fear of being buried alive is not uncommon. Isabel understood what she needed to relieve her fear. She needed to know exactly how we'd determine she was dead, and she wanted the details. So we had the first of several discussions about how the heart and the lungs stop. I told her we'd try to find a pulse at the wrist and in the neck, and then a blood pressure. We'd listen for a heartbeat or for sounds of breathing. These are absent right after death. I said she'd remain at home for an hour or so after death, during which time other signs would appear. Her body would become cold, and as the blood stopped flowing, mottled blue patches would appear on the underside of her body. These details may be too graphic for most people, but this is what Isabel needed to hear. They may sound too simple for someone of her background, but like many people, Isabel had little experience with death. She wanted to know how many times I'd seen people die, and how often I'd examined those who had just died. I told her everything I could. "Now I feel better," she said. "Talking about this has helped greatly. I think my dreams were caused by anxiety about this. Maybe being a psychologist isn't so bad. At least I can figure out my anxieties." On my next visit, her brother was on hand. Isabel asked if we could repeat our earlier discussion, but this time with Edward. So we talked again about Isabel's dreams and her fear of being buried alive, and I described for Edward how we tell if people are dead. "Now, Edward," said Isabel, "I want you to remember all of this. Don't you go trying to hurry things up and get me out of here too quickly. Please keep me here at home for at least 2 hours after I'm dead. Don't rush me out." Every few weeks over the next several months, Isabel asked to go over this topic. Each time she seemed less anxious. The night she died, Edward watched me check his sister's body for signs of life. As I finished and put away my stethoscope, he said, "I know Isabel's watching us to make sure we do everything we said we would. So I made some tea, and I've got some chocolate chip cookies." Edward and I spent 2 hours sitting with his sister, drinking tea, and eating cookies as he told me stories of their childhood. After the funeral, he said, "It never was easy for Isabel to admit she was afraid of anything. I'm glad she told us what frightened her and that we had all those weird conversations. At first it seemed ridiculous that I keep her home for 2 hours, but now it seems like such a little thing to have done, and I know it relieved her fears. It also helped me say goodbye." A dying person's dreams may be very important. Pay particular attention to vivid dreams, recurring dreams, or a series of dreams that are progressive in some way. If someone you know who is dying talks about dreams, he may be struggling with something he doesn't understand, but about which he has questions or strong feelings. Encourage him to tell you the details. Listen carefully. Ask him to interpret the dreams, but don't try to interpret them yourself. The most useful response is to try to help the person identify the feelings behind the dream. Dreams that frighten a person may relate to fears about illness or dying. Dreams full of anxiety may mean a person is worried about family, expenses, or arrangements that need to be made. Dreams that are puzzling often indicate a need for information. Very often, simply talking about their dreams helps the dying figure out what it is they are concerned about or need. Chapter 14. I think we only have like 3 more chapters, maybe. 3 more chapters. Final gifts. What a good read.